That is what makes this story different. Because this was not the entire government stopping for a tennis match. It was something more subtle. One senator putting her name into the official record, one political signal that a tennis result had crossed into national memory. And that alone says something powerful. Politicians do not usually move this quickly for a tennis story, especially in a country where tennis has rarely owned the national spotlight. So the real question is not just what happened in London. The real question is this: to understand that, you cannot start with the Senate. You cannot even start with Wimbledon. You have to go back to a small court in the Philippines, before center court, before the cameras, before the rankings. Before anyone in politics was saying her name, there was a little girl, there was a grandfather, there was a brother, and there was a dream that did not yet have proof. Eala started playing tennis when she was 3.5 years old. For years, her grandfather helped teach her the game. Not a famous global coach, not a perfect system. Family. After school, she trained with her brother Michael. Again and again. Day after day. Before there were headlines. Before there were viral clips. Before the Philippines had any real reason to believe one of its own could stand this deep inside Wimbledon. That detail matters. Because Eala did not come from a country with a ready-made tennis roadmap. There was no long line of Grand Slam breakthroughs for her to follow. No familiar national blueprint. No easy evidence that this dream could actually work. Her family had to believe before the world gave them permission. Then came the first sign. At 12 years old, Eala won Les Petites as one of the most respected junior tournaments in the world. That result caught the attention of the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain. Getting noticed was exciting. Accepting the opportunity was the hard part. Because it meant leaving home at 13, it meant moving to Mallorca. It meant trading familiar courts, familiar meals, familiar voices, and family routines for a demanding tennis life on the other side of the world. There was no promise that it would work. No promise that the sacrifice would turn into a professional career. No promise that the child leaving home would someday become the name a whole country would repeat. But the family said yes. And from that moment, every Eala milestone carried something larger than personal ambition. First junior Grand Slam title. First Filipina to break into the top 100. First moments where a country that had almost never seen itself in elite tennis could finally point to a player and say, "She is one of us." That is the emotional weight behind this story. It was never only about a young player climbing a ranking list. It was about a country seeing a locked door begin to open. But being first is not clean. It is not simple. It gives every win a bigger meaning. It also makes every loss feel louder. That is the part people forget when they celebrate a resolution. Just months before Wimbledon, Eala was still being tested. At the start of 2026, she lost early at the Australian Open. It was the kind of result that makes people ask uncomfortable questions. Was the Miami breakthrough real? Was 2025 the start of something lasting? Or was it one beautiful flash that would slowly fade? Later in the season, the pressure kept coming. At Linz, she fell to Jelena Ostapenko, a former French Open champion. In Stuttgart, Leylah Fernandez beat her in straight sets. No dramatic comeback. No viral celebration. No perfect story. Just another quiet loss on the road. Then there was another number that followed her. For a while, Eala had not beaten a Czech opponent in 11 tries. 0 wins. 11 losses. Against players from one country. That kind of number does not stay on a stat sheet. It follows you into the warm-up. It sits in the mind before the first serve. It waits for you when the match gets tight. Every athlete has difficult stretches. But when the difficult stretch comes after a breakthrough, the pressure changes. You are not only trying to win, you are trying to prove the breakthrough was not a lucky week. You are trying to prove the story is still alive. For Eala, that pressure came with distance too. She had trained abroad since she was 13. That meant missed family days, quiet meals after losses, long flights, small hotel rooms, bad mornings without the comfort of home nearby. And through all of it, she carried something most players never have to carry so young: the hope of being the first. So when she arrived at Wimbledon, the question around her was quiet but real. Was Alex Eala still rising? Or had the dream moved faster than the results? Then came center court, third round. Iga Swiatek across the net, one of the most decorated players of her generation. A champion with the kind of presence that can shrink the court for a young challenger. The first set went to a tiebreak. It stretched and tightened. Every point felt like a door closing or opening. Eala saved set points. She was one shot away from giving the doubters another reason. One shot away from hearing that the stage was still too big. But she did not disappear. She stayed in the rallies. She stayed brave. She kept taking the ball. And when the tiebreak finally ended, it was hers. 11-9. Then the second set changed everything. 6-2. The scoreboard said, upset. But the moment became bigger because of what came after. Standing on center court, still trying to breathe through the biggest win of her career, Eala did not turn the interview into a victory speech. She went back to childhood. She remembered training with her brother and her grandfather. She remembered ruffled socks. She remembered light-up shoes. She remembered chubby cheeks. And she said that to that little girl, this moment was everything. That was the line that changed the meaning of the win. Because suddenly, this was not only a tennis upset, it was a family story, a childhood story, a Philippine story. A young woman had just beaten one of the biggest names in the sport, but she did not sound like someone trying to become a celebrity. She sounded like someone who remembered exactly where the dream began. That is why people felt it. They did not only see an athlete, they saw a daughter, a granddaughter, a child who had grown into the dream her family once carried with her. That kind of moment does not stay inside the sports page. It reaches parents. It reaches young athletes. It reaches people who do not know rankings, seedings, or draw math. It reaches anyone who understands what it means to leave home with no guarantee. Back in the Philippines, the reaction grew fast. Fans watched together. Families followed the run from thousands of miles away. People who did not usually build their day around tennis suddenly cared about a fourth-round match in London. That is not normal behavior for a routine result. That is what happens when a private sporting journey becomes a shared national moment. The numbers around the run made the story harder to ignore. Eala became the first player from the Philippines, male or female, to reach the fourth round of a Grand Slam. She earned a Wimbledon paycheck worth about £300,000. Her ranking picture changed. Her name moved through international sports coverage. And at one point, one Wimbledon highlight featuring her appeared to travel farther online than clips involving some of the biggest names in tennis on the same channel. That matters, because it showed that this was not only Filipino fans celebrating among themselves. A wider audience was discovering her in real time. Inside a tournament filled with legends, a new name had broken through the noise. Then came the next step. Senator Bongo filed a proposed Senate resolution to honor her run. And suddenly, the story had moved into another space. Not just tennis, not just media, not just social reaction, official recognition. That is why the resolution matters. Not because every fourth-round finish deserves political attention, but because this fourth-round finish carried a story no Filipino tennis player had ever carried in quite this way. A normal fourth-round finish is a career achievement. For Alex Eala, it became a national marker, a sign that a player from the Philippines could belong on the biggest courts in the world. That is what the proposed resolution was really about. Belonging, visibility, memory. A country seeing itself in a place where it had rarely been seen before. Go back to the beginning, and the story becomes clearer. A little girl on a court in the Philippines. A grandfather teaching her the game. A brother hitting with her after school. A family deciding to send her across the world. Years of training. Years of doubt. Early exits. Quiet losses. The pressure of being first. Then one afternoon at Wimbledon, all of it surfaced in front of the world. That is why the ruffled socks line mattered. It gave people an image. Not just a score. Not just a ranking. not just a prize money number, an image, a child in light-up shoes, a family dream, a young player standing on center court trying to explain what it meant to become the person her younger self once imagined. Governments write in formal language. Fans remember pictures. They remember the little girl. They remember the grandfather. They remember the brother. They remember the voice shaking after the match. They remember a player who looked overwhelmed, not by fame, but by memory. That is why this story traveled. That is why it reached beyond tennis. That is why one senator decided the moment deserved a place in the official record. But recognition is not the ending. It is a marker, a line in the sand. It says this happened. It says the country saw it. It says Alex Eala is no longer only a promising athlete trying to make people notice. She is now part of a national sports conversation. And that brings a new kind of pressure. Because a resolution can honor a moment, it cannot win the next match. It cannot protect a player from the next draw. It cannot soften the next bad day. It cannot make the next opponent easier. That is why the next chapter matters. Eala now moves toward the North American hardcourt swing. Washington, D.C. The U.S. Open conversation. A different stage, a different audience, a different kind of attention. American fans may not carry the same emotional history that Filipino fans carry. Some may only know the Wimbledon clip. Some may only know the upset. Some may not yet understand the grandfather, the academy move, the early losses, the distance from home, or the meaning behind that center court interview. So the next challenge is not only tennis, it is whether the story can travel again. Can the same emotion cross the ocean? Can a new audience understand why this mattered so deeply? Can Eala turn national recognition into lasting international attention? That is the next question. Because a proposed Senate resolution can place a moment into the record, but only the player can decide what that moment becomes. For now, this much is clear. Alex Eala did not just win a match at Wimbledon. She gave the Philippines a tennis memory it had never had before. She turned a fourth-round run into a national conversation. She made lawmakers pay attention to a sport that rarely receives that kind of spotlight back home.